Hey you Prodigies, Prod Charles here, and in this video I'll be sharing with you another Bendy and the Ink Machine theory compilation. Remember to subscribe and tap that bell for more cool and interesting horror game theories like Bendy and the Ink Machine and Five Nights at Freddy's. If you want to move around this video quickly, then check the description, there will be timestamps for you. And if you don't have enough time to watch this right now, you can always tap add to and select watch later, and YouTube will save your progress. If you are a brand new Prodigy, be sure to let me know in the comments so I can welcome you, and get ready for the theories in 3, 2, 1. Another Bendy and the Ink Machine theory? You betcha! Hey you Prodigies, Prod Charles here, and in this video I'll be sharing with you a Bendy and the Ink Machine conspiracy theory. This one will explain why Bendy may be Joey Drew. Let's start with what we know. We know that the main character, Henry, was invited to the old cartoon studio, supposedly by Joey Drew. We also know that in order to fix the ink machine, 6 offerings had to be given up, and we learned that Joey Drew said that these offerings are there to appease the gods. When we fix the ink machine and switch the ink pressure on, a 3D Bendy appears to jump scare us. And at the end of chapter 1, Henry is standing in front of a pentagram drawn on the floor as a 3D Bendy appears. Got all those facts? Now let's bring it all together. At the beginning of Bendy chapter 1, it looks like Henry was invited by Joey Drew to see something back at the cartoon studio they used to work at 30 years ago. As we progress through the game, Henry says, "So this is what you wanted me to see," as he enters the ink machine room. This means that Joey may have invited Henry to come and see the ink machine to repair it, as we have already established in our What Happened to Boris the Wolf theory. However, we've already mentioned that the letter might not have been sent by Joey, but rather Bendy. This is because the letter has a stamp from the older days that's fashioned in the Bendy theme. But Bendy as a cartoon had pretty much flopped by this time, so why would this stamp be used or even exist? The cartoonists were not making deadlines, and it looked as if Joey was keeping up the studio purely to continue making offerings to the gods. If you want to learn more about this, check out my Is Joey Drew Dead theory. With that said, let's turn our attention to the ink machine for a moment. 3D Bendy will only appear when the ink machine is fixed and the ink flow is returned to normal. We know that Henry goes to the cartoon studio to see the ink machine, so it is possible that the real purpose for Henry seeing the ink machine is to fix it. If our predictions on Henry being some kind of genius is correct, he would have been invited to the studio for his curious mind and knack for fixing things. In other words, Henry might have been tricked into fixing the ink machine. This brings our attention back to Joey. At the end of chapter 1, 3D Bendy slowly emerges from the shadows and has a human shape, wearing a bow tie and possibly some shoes. This seems very different from the short and chibi-like stature that Bendy has in the posters. So what is up with this? Many prodigies have pointed out that Joey might be Bendy, and I'm starting to think that this may be the case too. We see many references to classical alchemy in some scenes of the game, especially the pentagram at the end of chapter 1 and the decagram at one part of the chapter 2 trailer. This may all hint towards Joey Drew going out of his way to transmute himself into 3D Bendy, as well as gathering all of the items needed to appease the gods, or in other words, get the ink machine started to perform the alchemic reaction. Joey Drew may have collected other things to help start and complete the process. The 2 most popular things that the prodigies have pointed out on my chapter 2 trailer analysis was Boris's heart and Bendy bacon. Joey's strong obsession with keeping the ink machine on may suggest that a steady flow of ink was needed to sustain the alchemic process. Some think that this is there as a kind of blood that helps keep the cartoons alive in their 3D forms. With all of the supernatural phenomena happening at the studio, it might have even been Joey Drew's spirit guiding Henry around in order to fix the ink machine to reanimate the 3D Bendy form. Could this also be the cause of the light turning off when we explore the facility? If this is the case, this may explain why the letter was written in Joey's handwriting and contained the Bendy stamp at the end. It just raises the question of how the letter was sent. Was it sent by the Joey/Bendy hybrid just as he was losing his form? Was it sent by Joey just before successfully completing the alchemic reaction? In either case, who stopped the reaction? The answer may have something to do with Boris the Wolf's death. What do you think? Another Bendy and the Ink Machine theory? You betcha! Hey yo Prodigies, Prod Charles here, and in this video I'll be sharing with you a Bendy and the Ink Machine theory. This one will explain why Boris the Wolf is back at the end of chapter 2. Let's start with what we know. We know that the main character, Henry, was invited to the old cartoon studio, supposedly by Joey Drew. We also learned in Chapter 1 that Joey Drew asked the workers at his cartoon studio to provide offerings to appease the gods. In Chapter 2, we are introduced to the director of music at Joey Drew's studio, Sammy Lawrence. Sammy has a dark, inky body and does not seem to be liked by 3D Bendy. And in Chapter 1, we see Boris's lifeless corpse on an operating table, but he appears in front of Henry, just fine, at the end of Chapter 2. Got all those facts? Now let's bring it all together. Before figuring out how Boris is alive, we first need to try to figure out what is happening in Joey Drew's cartoon studio. Let's start with the letter. Joey Drew invited Henry to the cartoon studio, but did not give a reason on the letter that he sent. The first audio tape that we get to hear in the game is by Wally Franks, the janitor at Joey Drew's cartoon studio. In this tape, Wally says that he has concerns about the ink machine and Joey's obsession with getting offerings to appease the gods. This suggests that Joey Drew is trying to make a higher power happy. But who? The events of the game so far seem to suggest that this would be Bendy. In Chapter 2, we are introduced to Sammy Lawrence, director of music at Joey Drew's cartoon studio. We hear him singing what sound like hymns or holy songs for Bendy. He roams around the studio and appears to have the ability to teleport to different areas, such as when we first see him move across the screen while singing one of his hymns, and also when he knocks out Henry at the end of Chapter 2, when he should have been on the upper floor of the orchestra room. This behavior seems to suggest that Sammy is preparing some kind of ritual around the studio, but for what? At the end of one tape at the beginning of Chapter 2, after he finishes praying to Bendy, we hear Sammy saying,
"But love requires sacrifice. Can I get an amen?"
After which Sammy says,
"I said, can I get an amen?"
But this time, he says it in the same room that Henry is standing. This not only supports Sammy setting up the ritual, it tells us that Henry was actually lured into the lower levels of the studio to act as a sacrifice for Sammy's setup. And this could explain the moving Bendy cutouts, the messages on the walls, and the light that flashes behind the door in Chapter 1, which, by the way, is actually accessible in the latest version, and shows a room with a radio in it that plays an instrumental of the Bendy and the Ink Machine song by Kyle Allen. Check out the full song in the card that pops up in the top right. This is further evidence that Sammy was probably in this room, and stalking us, as it has the music note symbol that we see all over the music department, and in Sammy's office. So now that we know that Sammy Lawrence set up rituals and led Henry into the low levels of the studio, how does that tie in with Boris? Remember that just before trying to sacrifice Henry to Bendy, Sammy Lawrence says that he must have him notice me, Bendy-senpai. But more importantly, he states that he's trying to get a sacrifice for his lord Bendy in order to free himself from his inky dark abyss of a body. He also says that it's in order to set us free. Who us is? I'm not sure. He may be referring to the other workers in the studio, or to himself turning back to normal and Henry being freed from his body, or in other words, Henry dying. But in either case, I suppose it would make sense. So, what does this mean? I think that Sammy Lawrence was trying to kill Henry in order to turn back to normal, or to transfer his ink form to Henry and turn himself back to normal. Whatever rituals were being performed at the studio, I think Joey Drew had a part in causing more than one staff member to be affected by the process. Sammy was one of the unlucky ones. This may explain why Boris is back. If Joey set out to bring his cartoons to life by sacrificing his staff members, Boris might have been brought back to life through the ritual performed by Sammy at the end of Chapter 2. Or this could be another Boris that we see that had been formed from one of the initial rituals. Remember that in one of Sammy's tapes, he says,
"These stupid cartoon songs don't write themselves, you know?"
Which shows that he is not passionate about the Bendy cartoons, and he isn't even passionate about his job. When the ritual was performed, his body was probably corrupted by the ink magic, turning it into a sorry puddle of a prison. In fact, he is probably the one who harmed Boris in the first place, which further supports the resurrection side of this theory. What do you think? Since we have to collect 6 items altogether in order to perform Joey Drew's ritual, I think that Sammy Lawrence, Joey Drew, Wally Frank, Susie Campbell, and Norman Polk, as well as at least one other victim, each donated an item to the ink machine. Sammy donated a vinyl record, Joey donated his art book, and the other characters donated other items. Tell me which ones you think the others donated. As Sammy had such a poor connection to anything to do with Bendy, even to the point of maybe hating Bendy, at least before his body became Ninky Prison, Sammy's intentions corrupted Joey Drew's ritual and caused his body to become what we see it to be. This might also be the reason why he turns to worshipping Bendy. Sammy realizes the error in his ways, and in order to get Bendy on his good side, tries to become a prophet for him. It may also explain why Bendy did not harm Henry in the first place. Henry had fond memories working at Joey Drew's cartoon studio and spent hours upon hours just drawing Bendy. Bendy definitely knew better. Now, which of the workers at the cartoon studio could have been turned into Boris? Whoever it was, they were probably passionate about the cartoon Bendy and Sheep Songs featuring Boris the Wolf. On the same note, I think Susie Campbell would have become Alice Angel. Just listen to what she says about Alice in her tape recording.
This is the first character I've really felt a connection with. She's a part of me. Alice and I, we're going places.
Lucky her that she didn't get the part of a talking chair at this studio. It looks like Susie and Alice may literally be going places in this game. On the same note, maybe Joey Drew really is Bendy. The reaction that took place for Joey Drew might have been similar to Sammy, except Joey Drew may have been able to cross the barrier further to be actually transformed into a cartoon. More Bendy and the Ink Machine secrets? You betcha! Hey you Prodigies, Charles here, and in this video I'll be sharing with you another Bendy and the Ink Machine secret. This video will cover the Bendy spawn glitch in Chapter 2, and reasons for why this might be there. So, what's this all about? Near the end of Chapter 2, Henry gets knocked out and captured by Sammy Lawrence, director of the music department at Joey Drew's cartoon studio. Sammy ties Henry up in a special room that he had to prepare in order to offer Henry as a sacrifice to Bendy. Sammy then tries to summon Bendy to go after Henry, but it ends up turning Sammy into a puddle of ink instead. This is where the fun starts. Henry breaks free and after fighting a few ink minions, chops his way into the next area. In the distance is a room flooded with ink. When you try to reach this area, Bendy will spawn in front of you and chase you out of the way. Trying to get around Bendy will cause the screen to black out. But there is still a way to get around Bendy. If you approach the room flooded with ink facing backwards and walk your way to the door that Bendy spawns in front of, you will be able to reach the door that Bendy guards. Behind the door, you will be able to hear the sound of the gears turning, like in Chapter 1. And every so often, you will be able to hear the whistling tune from the Bendy Chapter 2 teaser trailer. The sound of the gears turning makes it seem as if there is an ink machine on and running. In Sammy Lawrence's office, we can see blueprints for an ink machine with the characters CK2 printed on it. Some prodigies believe this to mean Mark II, which is another way to refer to something as a second version. However, Mark II is traditionally shortened to MK2, not CK2 as on these blueprints. Could these letters still hold the same meaning? If not, what do they mean? What is interesting about this is the whistling that we hear. The whistling suggests that someone is working on the other side of the door. But who? Out of the characters we've been introduced to so far, this could either be one of Wally Franks, Norman Folk, or Joey Drew. Assuming that Joey Drew would not make an appearance so early in the game, perhaps it is more reasonable to assume that Wally or Norman would be on the other side. Wally might be whistling because that's what he might have done to pass the time while working as a janitor, and Norman might be whistling out of habit of being bored while working his projector in the orchestra room. What do you think? I think that while this could be a really cool secret with a hidden meaning, it is just as likely a harmless oversight that remained in the game due to strict time constraints. Remember that Bendy Chapter 2 was developed from scratch and released with a completely renovated Chapter 1 only 2 months after Chapter 1's initial release. I have tested walking backwards to avoid triggering other situations too, and I was able to avoid triggering Bendy cutout jump scares and 3D Bendy's first jump scare this way. I was also able to get knocked out by Sammy followed by him teleporting in front of me this way. However, I was not able to get close to Boris the Wolf. The camera will always stop and turn around to show it walking from behind that corner. However, there could still be a meaning behind this. The noise and whistling behind the door might have initially been there to make players curious and open the door, only to be jump scared and chased by Bendy in the opposite direction. Or maybe Bendy would have initially spawned behind us to chase us deeper into the studio. Perhaps we also have been able to meet a new character, and it might have been another one of the Toons, or a new Toon character. As Mickey Mouse was famous for whistling in the classic Disney cartoon Steamboat Willie, it may be possible that Bendy actually was meant to be waiting behind that door for us. Remember to subscribe and tap that bell for more cool and interesting horror game videos. Prodigies, I really hope that these videos help you to expand on how you think so it can help you with how you go about your thinking in your daily lives. Remember to check back every weekend for a new video. See ya!